So you're listening to Afternoons with Tyler Axness. This is Mike Seminary substituting for Tyler. And I need to apologize for a text that came in. I guess it's an email. And I just saw it. Somebody asked for a background because they don't know much about me. So real quickly, I was born in Fargo, lived here until somebody asked me to go to Bismarck and get involved in his radio company. I moved out to Bismarck in 85 and then moved back 2 years ago. And while I was there, I was involved in the radio business, then in the engineering industry with two different engineering firms as the kind of the BD marketing guy. Had enjoyed so much because you're working with really smart people. Got involved in politics on a local basis. Enjoyed serving the people of Bismarck. Married to an incredibly talented, smart, the good-looking, fun, everybody wants to be with seminary. Have two daughters, and now back in Fargo, where I grew up, and have a podcast called Mike Seminary and Friends. And every once in a while, when they can't find anybody, I mean, no one is available to host or substitute for the host, they call me. And here I am. Well, my next guest, I had the pleasure of meeting, I'm going to say it's probably 4 years ago, something like that. Anthony Quill. Anthony, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. And first of all, before I start talking about what you and your wife, Kristen, do, where are you today?
I am in an off-grid cabin kind of northeast of Ely, Minnesota, way out in the sticks. So it sounds like I've got a good connection. That was my biggest worry here, was that we'd be too far away from human beings and cell towers to make it work, but here we are.
So is it cold there today?
You know, it is a very strange year. So it's probably 35 here. No snow. It looks, I mean, we're pretty close to the Canadian border. There's absolutely no snow. Last year we came to the same spot, same exact week, and I think there was 2 to 3 feet of powder everywhere. We could barely get around. So it's just amazing how different it is.
And you haven't been able to push your daughter into ice hole yet today?
Not yet, but we've done some ice skating out on the lake, so we're right on the edge of the boundary waters. So we strapped on the skates and prayed we didn't fall through. Did a little ice fishing, some hiking, and now we're back at the cabin. I'm inside where it's nice and warm. We've got a wood-burning fire going, and I kicked the kids and my wife outside so it can be quiet. So they're doing something. I don't know, maybe starting the sauna or shooting BB guns or something. I don't know. But they're not here.
Well, I asked Anthony and Kristen to be on. I think Anthony's going to do most of the conversation today to talk about what they do, because from a distance, I so admire what they do. I don't know that I could do it, because my idea of roughing it and camping is in a hotel that has, a continental breakfast in the morning. And that's it. But Anthony and Kristen, who are professionals, have first of all, they have a website called From Tent to Takeoff, From Tent to Takeoff.com. And they, as you just kind of heard, take their children on some of the most amazing experiences imaginable. They've been to Africa, Europe, Latin America, multiple destinations throughout the United States, and they are creating incredible memories and helping them develop new skills along the way. So, Anthony, share with us the genesis. How did From Tent to Takeoff.com, how did that get started with you and Kristen?
Yeah, so we have 2 kids. One is now 9, one's 7. So right when the oldest was born, we had the great idea that we should move overseas. And so if you backtrack just a couple of months, my wife was extremely pregnant, to the point where airlines were like, yeah, you can't come on. So we had to get a doctor's note, a lot of hoops to jump through, because I had just randomly gotten a job in Malta, which is a little island off the coast of Italy. It's separate from Italy. It's its own country, but it's, kind of like the Cayman Islands of Europe. And so I came home and told my wife, hey, I got this great opportunity. You want to move? And she looked at me like I was a nut job, which is probably the appropriate response in that situation. And I said, and we've got flights this coming weekend to Malta, so we can check it out and see if we like to live there. And so we hopped on a flight, went over to Malta, met with the guys that I would work with, kind of looked around what housing would be like, and then came back, sold our house, sold our possessions down to the spice rack, and moved over there when my son was about a month old. So he spent that whole first month living in a dresser drawer, literally, on the floor because we didn't have anything else for him to live in. And we moved over to Malta, and we stayed there for 5 years. So my daughter, Betty, was born there in the government hospital in the middle of the island. And that whole time, we took every opportunity we could to travel. So a lot of it was Southern Mediterranean just because it was close to home at that point in our lives. And, you know, around then, too, this whole like travel blogging scene had taken off, but I didn't have a Facebook account. I didn't know what Instagram was. I was a Neanderthal when it came to anything social media. And so we kind of talk like, hey, we should do something, and then we never do it. And then we moved home. We started getting tons of emails from friends and friends of friends. Hey, I'm going to Morocco. I'm going to Malta. I'm going here. Any recommendations? And we're like, you know what? We've talked about this for, 5 years now. Let's just put some work into it. Write this stuff down once so we don't have to write the same email 40 times and see what happens. And so one summer, I just said, we're doing it. Started the website and started writing a ton. And here we are.
Folks, you need to go to from tent to takeoff.com. And one of the reasons I asked Anthony and Kristen to join us was as you look into 2024, and like we all do, we explore what are some changes we can make? What are some ways we can provide new opportunities, experience for loved ones? This is a site you should visit. It is full of incredibly valuable information. And by the way, not everybody is going to be in a position to go to Africa, Europe, or Latin America. But Anthony and Kristen have spent plenty of time traveling the United States. There they are today in Eli, Minnesota. And they share all these valuable tips. One thing I'm always curious about when you and I visit, some of these things you never did. You're kind of sometimes figuring it out on the fly, or do you do a lot of prep before you go, or do you do both?
I think it depends on who you ask. I'm a little bit more of on the fly. I like that feeling of being right at the edge of things that I know. Kristen is not that way at all. So she is very much a planner. So we always joke I'm kind of the chief dreamer. She's the one that actually does the stuff to make it happen. But for a lot of our trips, for both of us, whether they're trips or just, different adventures close to home, one of the key themes is it's things that are just right outside of our comfort zone. So what's off our beaten path is very different than what's, going to be off yours or off any of the listeners. But kind of the main theme we keep trying to hit home is you just got to get your toes over that line. And that line's unique to you, and it doesn't matter where it is. It's the no judgment zone. But you do got to get out of your comfort zone because otherwise no growth happens. Everything feels easy, and that's not good for parents, and that's no way to teach kids kind of how to push their envelopes and build that resilience that I think, all kids need.
Yeah. By the way, I love how you just put that with regards to not just what you're doing, but it's a great philosophy in life. If you're not pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, it's really hard to grow. And sometimes, by the way, you get blown out of it by somebody or something else anyway. When we get back from this break, Anthony, I'm going to ask you to go into a little bit more detail on a couple of things. And while we do me a favor, look out the door because there are bear and wolves out there. I want to make sure your wife and kids are still there, and then you come back from the break and let me know if they're still there, okay?
Will do.
Thanks. You're listening to Afternoons with Tyler Axness. This is Mike Seminary. Good afternoon, Mike Seminary. You're listening to Afternoons with Tyler Axness, and I'm substituting for Tyler today. My guest currently is Anthony Quill, and he and his wife, Kristen, have a website you should look at if you intend to travel with your kids or travel with anybody. From tent to takeoff.com. Great information. The numbers, by the way, I've neglected to do that. If you want to ask Anthony a direct question in terms of how to plan well with a unique vacation with your kids, 237-5948, 1-800-880-5346, or you can text to hashtag KFGO 5346. Anthony, one of the questions, wife and kids still there? No problems with the bear or wolf?
No problems. No, they're out. So where we're at, there's a bird feeder outside of this picture window right in front of me.
Okay.
And there's tons of these black-capped chickadees that come. And if you know anything about them, they're like these cute little songbirds. They stick around in the winter. And they're known for eating out of your hands. If you put some bird seed in there and you sit there long enough, they'll go. The problem here is there's 3 vicious squirrels that have taken over the bird feeder. And so my wife's out there with a stick trying to hit the squirrels off the bird feeder as I'm trying to focus on talking to you.
So, share some tips if you don't mind. And you have, again, great information at your website. Share some tips for folks that maybe for the first time or the first time didn't go so well, how they can plan a better trip. And then second question is, how do you involve your son and daughter in that process before you go somewhere?
Yeah. So, on the planning side, it's really about finding that fine line between what's comfortable for you and what's just going to be too much. And that's for you and for whoever the kind of lowest common denominator in the family is. So, like we camp a lot and we do some very intense backcountry camping. But for most people, that is not something they should do yet. It just doesn't make sense. And there's absolutely no way that if you go from 0 to 10 days in the wilderness, that's going to end well. And so the first thing is you just have to find something that is meaningful for you as a family, and that is a little bit out of your comfort zone. And I'm going to kind of jump a little bit into question 2 there, just because we think it's one of the most important pieces of the puzzle is you got to get everyone involved. Because if you put together a great trip and my wife could put together an amazing Disneyland trip, and she put together, the kids would probably, at least in theory, love it. I would be miserable. I would hate every second of it. I would be crabby. I would complain the whole time. I'm not that big of a fan of, big crowds, lots of people. And so in that kind of those planning steps, picking something that's not interesting for everyone is just not going to work out.
Let me ask you this question, Anthony. Prior to this whole process, prior to sharing with your very pregnant wife that, hey, we're leaving the confines of the States, we're going over to this little island next to Italy, how much camping had you done? Was that part of your family DNA?
It wasn't so much my family's. My family was more kind of farm oriented, so I had a lot of dirt bikes and that kind of outdoorsy life, a lot of hunting. But I was in the Boy Scouts as a kid, and the first real trips we did were to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, which is in northeastern Minnesota, and it's a 1 million acre wilderness. No motors allowed, no gadgets, there's no cell reception, and so that was my first kind of introduction to what I see a term like backcountry camping or real camping, where there's a skill set that goes along with it that keeps you safe and happy. And for my wife, it's the same. Her parents grew up north, her dad did. And so she was kind of, as a kid, introduced to that style of camping as well.
Anthony, we're running out of time here. First of all, I want to thank you for taking time to join me, and particularly you're on family time. You are in the middle of nowhere, and you took the time to join me. The website, again, folks, is from tenttotake-off.com. There is so much valuable information there. If you're planning something in the 2024, visit there. Anthony, thanks so much. Enjoy your time. Appreciate you so much. You're listening to Afternoons with Tyler Axness. This is Mike Seminary filling in for Tyler.